I guess over, I suppose, 10 years of very close association and longer than that in a more broad association with victims or survivors of sexual abuse within the church. On an individual and personal level, it's often, it's individual and personal through phone and meetings and endless cappuccinos and lattes and at their place or wherever it might happen to be. The phone is particularly important, and I've found, I suppose, over the years since I suppose I shot my mouth off and within the public arena, the number of people who've made contact has been very interesting in the sense that people who don't know me have contacted me and told me their story and wanted to meet. And I think that's been interesting, that they've still wanted to connect with the priest, notwithstanding what's happened to them. In addition to that one-on-one situation, which is with probably overall with more than 100, some just a fleeting meeting or one off or twice off meeting, but others on a regular basis. There's been the organisational side of things where about 4 years or so ago, with a few other people of similar disposition, some of them practising Catholics, some of them not practising Catholics, and some of them not Catholics, and some of them not believers. We've come together to try and address this fairly significant gap in, not so much in it's a gap in what the church itself does, but it's a gap in the way in which society, humanity, deals with some very broken people. And so we've got it's a small organisation, but it's, jargon phrase, but I think it's made a difference along the way in its general care of individuals, both practically in terms of often financial support, but also just helping people know whether the quote they've got for their car repair is going to rip them off or whether it's a genuine quote, helping people find accommodation, maybe particularly at the moment trying to see if we can find some work, even part-time, for people. Those sort of things make a big difference in terms of, they're marks of respect for the individual. I think that's counted a lot. And we put that into a structural basis, little organisation we call Lifeboat Geelong. And despite the title, it's actually interacting with people all over the country, but probably about 20 of the 60 we're dealing with directly within Lifeboat. 20 would be from Geelong and the rest from here and there. One of the important areas, I think, of things like memorials and the work of Lifeboat and any area of support being given to people, particularly in the public arena, is it removes, or it certainly lessens, the sense of isolation that so many people have felt. I think a common story with so many survivors has been a sense of being alone in all this. Often they've been so alone that their story has not been told to anybody else. And the focus that there's been over the last 5 or 10 years to encourage them to tell their story with respect and to someone who cares, has lifted that blanket of loneliness and isolation that they have felt. And when that's put into perhaps the public arena of an organisation or a memorial or a fund where there is practical help as well, that can make an enormous difference. When we chose the name of Lifeboat, we chose it because when I had been speaking at the parliamentary inquiry, and I said, for many people, their personal faith is something which gets them through all sorts of crises. But when what has happened has been as a result of the actions of someone from the church, I use the phrase, the lifeboat goes down with the ship. And so Lifeboat has been an attempt to refloat that lifeboat. But another victim survivor in Geelong, who's been a very courageous person in the public arena and helped a lot of others like him, said to me, it was a good name to choose for a different reason. He said, when you get on board a ship, you see the lifeboats there, you hope you don't have to use it, but you're glad that it's there, and you know it's there if you need it. And I found that quite insightful and spot on in terms of what it can be. So even within just the choice of a name, any organisation's picking a name, you say, well, what do we call it? And it's come to mean a bit to them. And the fact that it's there, it's hung in. We've had there's been a few of them, a loud fence around my church at St Mary's. We've got 300 metres of fencing around St Mary's in Geelong, and every centimetre of it was filled with ribbons. And we had a special ceremony to take them down, and we brought them into procession into the church, and about 400 people turned up, quite a number of survivors amongst them, and they're being put into a something that's being built by one of the men's sheds in Geelong, into a small, but that big, lifeboat, transparent, and that'll be at the front of the church as a permanent memorial too. So that's sort of happening at the moment. I think the thing that encourages most people to follow in any area of movement is a sense of commitment and conviction on the part of the people who are already doing it, because they're really saying, hey, this is worthwhile doing. I can remember when I was a bit shaky in my time studying for the priesthood, I was wondering whether I would continue. I was fortunate enough to meet a priest who embodied everything that I thought a priest should be. And I never ever spoke to him about the fact that I was a bit shaky as to whether I'd continue or not. But the power of his example and his commitment was such that I thought, hey, if that's what priesthood is all about, this is worth continuing with. And it got me over that speed hump, and the rest is my history at any rate. But I think that those of us who are doing this work must not lose our sense of commitment to its value. And that's probably the most contagious thing we can have. Say, this is really worth doing, and not for us, but for the people who need what we're doing. And look, it's the old story. If you see someone trying to push a car and get it kick-started, and they're on their own, you say, and they're really having a go and trying to do it on their own, you'll stop your car, get out and say, hey, here's a couple of us, we'll give you a hand. And the car gets started. So there's nothing like the person, if the person's just standing by the side of the road with a cardboard sign saying, can you help us kickstart this car? You're more likely to just drive on. But if he's in there having a go, even though he can only just move it, you'll get out and stop and help him, because it's that conviction which is contagious. I think the most important thing that lies for those who choose leadership, the church, we are often told, is not a democracy. But that said, certainly within many religious orders, not so much within dioceses and the selection of bishops, but people are elected in religious orders by their peers. And I would hope that those who elect them would choose the right people. Maybe there's an opportunity, this is a bit outside the square, though, that for religious orders, for example, to involve in the election of their leaders people who may not be religious, members of their own religious community, but are people who have a strong affinity with them and support them in different. There are a lot of people who've got connection with various religious orders and have had that connection for decades. Why not bring them into the selection process as well? In terms of the diocese, I know we've heard we know that there are many dioceses that do not even have a diocesan pastoral council. That should be absolutely mandatory, and maybe in the selection of leaders into the future, that at least brings in the potential for a different outlook. And hopefully people who look at the dire situation that the church is in, I don't think the real horror, for want of a better word, not only of the offences, but of this absolute quagmire the church has got itself into, and there's been plenty of chances for them to emerge from it much better than they are at the moment. But I don't think the penny is still dropped as to just how bad this is. We're seeing the empty churches and the lack of people under 50 week after week, and we just say, oh, well, that's just a secular society. That's part of the story, but it's not all the story. A lot of it is a sense of disillusionment, a sense of disengagement, a sense of betrayal. And unless, in terms of, we need real leaders to lead us out of that, and they don't necessarily have to come from clerical ranks. And that's one of the important stories that I think that's coming out of the Commission at the moment. Look, I suppose the old saying, nothing succeeds like success. I would be hopeful that with the, I think, demonstrable capacity of Lifeboat, and not just Lifeboat itself, but its method of approach, the fairly broad-ranging, I suppose holistic is the buzzword, approach to everything from affirmation to employment to somewhere to live to someone to listen to paying a bill to finding out how to use best what money you have. That sort of approach is so different from what's been done up until now, where money has been given and that could be gone by next Wednesday and so on. This is an interest in the whole person, and little by little maybe the value of not just the organisation, Lifeboat is just a group of people who have taken on a name, but the value of that approach is, I think, maybe going to become more evident. The importance of all of the things that are represented in say, the memorial, of having something external and something that speaks loudly to the community, to all who visit a particular place, such as Xavier College and so on. I think that you just keep doing what you need to do, and eventually it'll take on. We've had all sorts of examples of that. We maybe take a leaf out of the women's footy. I mean, who would have ever thought? They've kept at it, and there they were with sellout crowds a while back, and who knows that these are some things, these are good examples where a mixture of perseverance, and if something seems to be right, well, you keep at it, and eventually you can win through, and people will look back and say, why do we ever think any differently than this? And I think that's possible in this whole terrible saga, but it's for the individuals that we've got to keep first and foremost, their well-being and and their value. In terms of what's ahead for the sort of survivors and victims, interesting, the two words. Some will see themselves as victims. Some are at the point where they say, I'm a survivor. It's Gloria Gaynor, wasn't it, I think, sang that song? I'm a survivor, something. Some will see themselves in one capacity or the other. I would hope that little by little, more and more will see themselves as having survived all this, but more than surviving, but rather than to get back a sense of vitality and enrichment, notwithstanding what will never go away from them, but learning how to, my mother's favourite word, learning how to manage it in the very best possible way. Mum loved that word, manage. Good word. You can't ignore that it's happened. You can't just ignore the effect that it's had. But today is today and tomorrow is tomorrow. And there's if we can draw people more and more to believe in the value of today and the enormous positive potential of tomorrow, I think we're so far ahead of where we were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago in that fight. I think we're in a place that we could never have dreamed possible not all that long ago for the well-being of survivors, and that's great. We've just got to keep on going.